Matthew Malloy is the perfect example of a character who was simply too powerful to exist. Unlike many overpowered characters who spent decades slowly accumulating feats and upgrades, Matthew appeared and almost immediately established himself as a problem that nobody in the Marvel Universe knew how to solve. He was an ordinary mutant whose powers manifested after a tragedy, but the abilities that emerged were stronger than those of most mutants. They were on a different level. As the X-Men began investigating him, they quickly realized that they were dealing with someone whose powers seemed to have no ceiling. Every attempt to understand him only revealed that he was even more dangerous than they originally thought. Matthew seemed to have access to virtually every major mutant ability imaginable. He demonstrated overwhelming telepathy, allowing him to influence minds on a massive scale. He possessed telekinesis, powerful enough to affect his environment effortlessly. He could manipulate matter and energy, alter reality, and even resurrect himself after death. And these powers appeared to be natural extensions of a mutant gift that constantly adapted to his needs. If Matthew encountered a problem, his powers often evolved a solution automatically. This made him incredibly unpredictable because nobody knew where his limits actually were, or whether he even had any. At one point, Matthew accidentally killed some very powerful mutants simply because he lost control of his emotions. He could erase people from existence almost instinctively. When the authorities and superheroes attempted to intervene, they discovered that confronting him directly was nearly impossible. Physical attacks were meaningless, psychic attacks were ineffective, and even death wasn't a reliable solution because Matthew could bring himself back. Every escalation only confirmed the same conclusion. Matthew wasn't becoming dangerous. He already was dangerous, and nobody possessed the tools necessary to contain him. So instead of defeating Matthew in a conventional battle, the heroes targeted the origin of his existence. Through time travel, they went back and prevented the chain of events that led to Matthew developing into the threat he became. In other words, they didn't beat him in the traditional superhero sense, they essentially removed him from the timeline before the problem could fully develop. That's an incredibly revealing detail because Marvel has faced countless powerful villains over the years, yet Matthew was one of the rare cases where the story concluded that allowing him to continue existing was simply too dangerous. The fact that reality itself had to be altered to stop him says more about his power than any power set in the Marvel Universe. So we will never see him in the MCU, ever. Molecule Man was an ordinary man who gained incredible abilities after an accident involving some experimental technology. Taking the name Molecule Man, Owen discovered that he could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Early stories portray him as a dangerous but relatively straightforward supervillain. Yet over the years, writers kept expanding the true nature of his powers. What started as control over molecules gradually evolved into control over reality. The biggest twist came when Marvel revealed that Owen was so much more important than anyone realized. Rather than being a simple superhuman, he was tied directly to the structure of the multiverse and unknowingly served as one of the most important beings in existence. As of his power set, he can manipulate matter, energy, space, dimensions, and reality on a scale that few characters can match. He can transform objects into completely different substances, create entire structures from nothing, disintegrate enemies instantly, and reshape environments with thought. As his abilities evolved, he became capable of affecting entire universes rather than individual objects. The laws of physics essentially became suggestions around him. One of the most important chapters in Owen's history came during Marvel's multiversal crisis leading into Secret Wars. It was revealed that every version of Molecule Man throughout the multiverse had been engineered as a living bomb. Each Owen race acted as a kind of cosmic trigger connected to the survival of his universe. When universes collided during the incursions, the Molecule Man became central to the fate of reality. This revelation transformed Owen from a powerful reality warper into one of the key pieces holding the multiverse together. The entire conflict eventually revolved around forces trying to exploit or control the Molecule Man because their existence was tied to the destruction and recreation of everything. His greatest feat came during the 2015 Secret Wars event involving Dr. Doom. After gaining power stolen from the Beyonders, Doom effectively became a god and built Battleworld from the remains of destroyed realities. For a time, Doom appeared unstoppable, yet behind the scenes, Owen Reese was secretly helping sustain that reality. More importantly, he eventually became the key to Doom's downfall. Once Owen stopped supporting Doom's creation, the balance of power shifted. After Doom was defeated, Molecule Man played a major role in rebuilding the Marvel multiverse. So most heroes save a city, some save a planet, a handful save a universe. Owen helped reconstruct the entire multiverse after its destruction. That places him in a category occupied by only a tiny handful of Marvel characters. The reason Molecule Man would be way too powerful for the MCU is that his abilities make almost every traditional conflict irrelevant. His His role in Marvel mythology is tied directly to the structure of the multiverse, making him far more significant than a typical hero or villain. Once a character can help destroy, rebuild, and redefine reality on that scale, it becomes incredibly difficult to create believable challenges around him. When people talk about the most powerful characters in Marvel history, the pre-Retcon Beyonder is almost always near the very top of the conversation. He first appeared during the original Secret Wars era, where he was introduced as a mysterious being from a realm beyond the entire Marvel multiverse. At the time, Marvel didn't portray him as a cosmic entity, a mutant, or a member of some ancient race. He was presented as something completely unknown, a being whose existence came from outside the structure of reality. Fascinated by concepts like desire, conflict, and human emotion, the Beyonder began observing the Marvel universe and eventually inserted himself into it. The scale of the Beyonder's power was so extreme that Marvel described him as being greater than the entire multiverse combined. Not greater than a universe, not greater than a collection of universes, but greater than everything that existed within Marvel reality at the time. Cosmic abstracts, universal forces, and godlike entities that normally operated beyond mortal comprehension were insignificant compared to him. Concepts that other characters struggled to control were effortless for the Beyonder. Matter, energy, space, time, life, death, reality were things he could manipulate however he wished. He could create worlds, erase worlds, resurrect the dead, alter minds, grant infinite power, and reshape existence without any visible strain. Characters and forces that represented fundamental aspects of existence attempted to oppose the Beyonder, yet they barely registered as a threat. Their combined efforts accomplished virtually nothing. Throughout Secret Wars 2, he repeatedly displayed powers that made even the strongest beings in Marvel look helpless. He could casually grant immense power to ordinary individuals, alter reality across vast distances, and perform miracles that would normally be impossible even for cosmic gods. At one point, he transformed himself into a human simply because he wanted to experience life firsthand. His stories often focused on his attempts to understand humanity. He would encounter concepts like love, greed, ambition, fear, and compassion, and react to the perspective of a being who possessed ultimate power but lacked emotional understanding. Sometimes he tried helping people and accidentally caused disasters. Sometimes he became frustrated and reshaped reality to fit his expectations. Entire civilizations could be affected by his moods, questions, or experiments. The danger came from the fact that his curiosity operated on a cosmic scale. A normal person might ask questions and have conversations. The Beyonder might ask a question and accidentally rewrite existence while searching for the answer. The MCU already has difficulty balancing characters like Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, and cosmic beings because their abilities can dramatically alter the stakes of a story. The Beyonder takes that problem and multiplies it beyond imagination. Every conflict would ultimately depend on what he wanted to happen. Hope Summers. It might seem like an unusual choice for a list of characters who are too powerful for the MCU, especially because she doesn't usually throw planets around or erase universes. What makes her a bit too OP isn't her destructive power or something like that, it's the versatility of her mutant ability. She was introduced as the first mutant born after Scarlet Witch's famous No More Mutants event, and was immediately treated as one of the most important figures in the history of mutants. Many believe she was destined to save mutant kind, while others feared she could destroy it. Raised across a war-torn future and protected by Cable throughout her childhood, Hope grew up with conflicts everywhere, and as she matured, it became clear that her true significance wasn't tied to a single power, but to her unique relationship with the powers of every mutant around her. Hope's primary ability allows her to copy, synchronize with, and amplify the powers of nearby mutants. Unlike many power mimics in comics, she can access powers with incredible precision, often using them as effectively or sometimes even more effectively than their original owners. If she's standing near a telepath, she can become a telepath. If she's near a telekinetic, she gains telekinesis. If she's surrounded by multiple mutants, she can combine their abilities together and use them simultaneously. This creates an almost endless number of possible power combinations, depending on who happens to be nearby. In practical terms, Hope rarely enters a fight with a fixed power set. Many characters who copy powers struggle to understand or master them. Hope often demonstrates immediate proficiency. She can instinctively coordinate abilities from multiple mutants at the same time, effectively turning herself into a living mutant team. And this turns Hope into more than a mimic. She acts almost like a catalyst, increasing the effectiveness of the powers around her, while also gaining access to them herself. I guess you know now why she is way too powerful for the MCU. The more superpowered individuals the MCU introduces, the stronger Hope becomes. Imagine a version of Hope, standing near telepaths like Professor X, reality warpers like Scarlet Witch, cosmic beings, powerful sorcerers, and Omega-level mutants, all at the same time. Her ability could potentially give her access to an absurd collection of powers within a single scene. Writers would constantly have to explain why she isn't borrowing the perfect ability for every situation. Every new hero introduced into the MCU would indirectly become a potential upgrade for Hope. The One Above All sits at the absolute peak of Marvel's hierarchy. While most powerful characters can be compared, ranked, or measured against one another, those discussions essentially stop when the One Above All enters the conversation. He isn't a cosmic ruler, a powerful mutant, or an ancient god competing with other entities for dominance. He's portrayed as the supreme creator of the Marvel multiverse itself, the being responsible for all realities, dimensions, timelines, cosmic forces, and forms of life. Every universe, every hero, every villain, and every cosmic entity ultimately exists because of him. Throughout Marvel's history, he has appeared only rarely, and his limited appearances have only added to his mystique, making him less of a traditional character and more of a fundamental part of Marvel's mythology. Characters like Galactus, the Beyonder, Franklin Richards, or Molecule Man can perform incredible feats that readers can observe and measure. The One Above All exists beyond those comparisons. He is generally treated as omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. In simple terms, there is no corner of reality he cannot reach, no event he cannot know, and no action beyond his capability. And Marvel has repeatedly portrayed him as a force associated with love and compassion rather than domination, which makes him very different from the countless cosmic entities that spend their time battling one another. Even though his status within Marvel leaves no doubt about what he is capable of, every major cosmic entity from eternity and infinity to the living tribunal and beyond exists beneath him. Entire multiverses can be created or erased by his will. The reason the One Above All would be way too powerful for the MCU is simple. Stories need uncertainty. Audiences need to wonder whether heroes can succeed, whether villains can be stopped, and what consequences might follow. The One Above All exists beyond all of those questions. Any conflict involving him would end the moment he chose for it to end. Every villain, every cosmic threat, every multiversal crisis, and every reality warping disaster would ultimately be insignificant compared to a being who created existence. He works best as a distant presence rather than an active participant. Once you introduce a truly omnipotent creator into the center of a story, the focus shifts away from heroes and villains, because there is no longer any meaningful obstacle left to overcome. The Chaos King, known as Amatsu Mikabushi, he originally comes from Japanese mythology, where he is portrayed as a god of chaos and darkness. In his early Marvel appearances, he was dangerous, but nowhere near the unstoppable force he would eventually become. Over time, Marvel expanded his role, revealing that Mikabushi wasn't just another evil deity competing with other gods for power. He became a primordial embodiment of chaos that existed long before civilizations, heroes, or even most cosmic powers. By the time his story reached its peak, he had evolved into a threat tied to the very concept of non-existence, acting as a living extension of the emptiness that existed before creation. His goal was never conquest, domination, or revenge. Most Marvel villains want to rule something. Mikabushi wanted there to be nothing left to rule. His power represented the return of reality to absolute nothingness. He sought to erase the universe completely. As his influence expanded, he became a walking apocalypse, capable of consuming realities, entire dimensions, civilizations, and cosmic structures were vulnerable to being swallowed by the endless void he carried with him. The closer existence itself came to simply disappearing. His most famous storyline, Chaos War, showcased exactly how absurdly powerful he is. During his campaign across reality, the Chaos King systematically wiped out gods and cosmic beings on a multiversal scale. Pantheons that had existed for ages were slaughtered. Divine realms fell one after another. Countless powerful entities who would normally be treated as major threats in their own stories were effortlessly overwhelmed. By the height of the conflict, it was estimated that the overwhelming majority of the multiverse had already fallen. And as the war escalated, the heroes realized that conventional solutions weren't going to work. There was no artifact powerful enough to simply defeat him, and no army large enough to stop him. The only reason the multiverse survived was because Hercules was transformed into something far greater than his normal self. He was infused with the power of the multiverse, essentially becoming the embodiment of existence, standing against the embodiment of non-existence. Let's be honest, the Avengers, the Guardians, the Eternals, the gods, and even many cosmic entities would become background characters in a story centered around him. The MCU already treats multiversal disasters as massive endgame events, yet the Chaos King essentially embodies the successful version of those disasters. The Marquis of Death. Most comic fans have never heard of. His real name is Clyde Winsham, and his story starts on Earth 1218, a universe that Marvel treats as the real world, where comic books exist and superheroes are fictional. Clyde was born with incredible mutant abilities that nobody around him could understand. An alternate future version of Clyde eventually returned and freed his younger self, taking him on a journey through time that lasted literally billions of years. During that unimaginable span of time, Clyde learned the secrets of reality, mastered every aspect of his powers, and transformed into the being known as the Marquis of Death. By the time he returned, he had become something that operated on a completely different level from almost every character in Marvel history. The Marquis of Death can manipulate matter, energy, space, time, dimensions, and entire universes as if they were toys. He doesn't need technology or magical artifacts or cosmic weapons to perform these feats. Reality simply bends to his will. He can create life, erase life, alter the laws of physics, reshape worlds, and rewrite events with almost no effort. His control extends across countless realities and timelines, allowing him to move through the multiverse freely while altering whatever he encounters. One of the best examples of his powers comes from his treatment of Dr. Doom. During a storyline, rather than simply attacking Doom, the Marquis trapped him inside an incredibly detailed illusion that felt completely real. Within that false reality, Doom spent years fighting heroes, changing the world, and building what appeared to be a global utopia. He experienced victories, failures, and the passage of time exactly as if it were real life. Then the Marquis revealed the truth. Only a few minutes had passed. Everything Doom experienced had been manufactured for the Marquis' amusement. After breaking Doom psychologically, he casually transformed Doom's heart into stone, turned his blood into acid, and hurled him millions of years into the past where prehistoric predators awaited him. Of course, his list of feats goes far beyond tormenting Doom. The Marquis of Death has casually destroyed entire universes with simple gestures. He has eliminated alternate versions of powerful heroes and villains across the multiverse, treating worlds full of superhumans as minor obstacles, and more. In the end, defeating the Marquis required the heroes to locate a much earlier version of Clyde before he became the Marquis, and bring that innocent version into the conflict. The paradox and the internal conflict weakened him enough for Dr. Doom to finally strike back. The Marquis completely destroys the idea of stakes and conflict. He exists on a scale where entire universes can disappear in moments, and years of history can be rewritten for entertainment. Characters like the Avengers, the Guardians, Doctor Strange, or even cosmic beings would struggle to meaningfully participate in a story centered around him, because the gap in power is simply enormous. Every battle would become a question of whether the Marquis decides reality should continue functioning normally. Writing around that level of power is incredibly difficult because almost every problem can be solved instantly, and almost every opponent becomes irrelevant. Mad Jim Jaspers is just a strange mutant. First off, he was born with his powers. He appears almost harmless at times, often behaving like an eccentric politician or unstable man with very bizarre ideas. The problem is that his mind and reality are connected in a way that few beings in Marvel can even comprehend. His thoughts don't simply influence the worlds around him, they actively reshape it. The more unstable and unhinged he becomes, the more dangerous reality becomes. Over the years, different versions of Jaspers have appeared across multiple realities. Jasper's powers are often described as reality warping, but that description barely scratches the surface. He doesn't just alter matter or energy, he rewrites the fundamental rules governing existence. Psychics, logic, casualty, and natural laws all become flexible concepts in his presence. Mountains can become oceans, living creatures can be transformed into impossible monstrosities, and entire landscapes can change according to his whims. Reality obeys him because his mutant power effectively allows him to redefine what reality is. On Earth 238, Jasper's reality warping abilities continued growing until they spiraled out of control. Entire regions of existence became twisted beyond recognition as the laws of nature collapsed under the pressure of his power. The situation became so unstable that it wasn't viewed as a threat to a single planet or civilization anymore. It became a threat to the multiverse. The distortion created by Jaspers was expanding and evolving in ways that could eventually spread beyond his own universe. Faced with that possibility, Marvel's Cosmic Guardians concluded that there was only one viable solution, and that's erasing Earth 38 entirely. So what happened? The entire universe was destroyed because allowing it to continue existing was considered a greater risk than eliminating it. Most MCU conflicts rely on cause and effect. Heroes make plans, villains execute schemes, battles happen, and consequences follow. Jaspers operates above that framework because he can alter the framework, a fight against him wouldn't be about strength, skill, or strategy. It would be about surviving in a reality where the rules can change every second according to the whims of his unstable mind. Even characters like Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, or the most powerful cosmic beings in the MCU would struggle because Jaspers isn't merely attacking reality, he's rewriting it as he goes. Onslaught is one of the most dangerous beings Marvel has ever unleashed. He was created from the darkest parts of two of the most powerful mutants in existence, Professor X and Magneto. After Magneto ripped the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton, Professor X retaliated by invading Magneto's mind and shutting down his consciousness. In the process, Xavier absorbed some of Magneto's rage, hatred, and psychological instability. Those negative traits remained buried within him for years, growing in secret until they eventually developed into a separate psychic entity known as Onslaught. His power set was absolutely ridiculous. He possessed the telepathy of Professor X, allowing him to dominate minds on a global scale, manipulate memories, and mentally overwhelm even powerful psychics. At the same time, he inherited Magneto's mastery over magnetism, giving him control over metal, electromagnetic forces, and much of the physical environment around him. As he grew stronger, those abilities expanded to absurd levels. He could create gigantic energy constructs, manipulate matter, generate devastating force fields, absorb energy, and reshape entire battlefields at will. Eventually, he became a psionic entity whose power continued increasing as he absorbed additional energy and abilities. By the peak of the storyline, he was operating on a level that threatened the entire planet. If that wasn't enough, he could also steal and absorb powers from others. After capturing the mutant Franklin Richards and gaining access to reality warping energies, his threat level skyrocketed. Franklin was already one of the most powerful mutants in existence, and Onslaught sought to exploit that power for himself. Throughout the conflict, Hero struggled to understand exactly how powerful he had become because his abilities seemed to grow continuously. The more energy he acquired, the more difficult he became to stop. The scale of the Onslaught crisis became so severe that it required an unprecedented alliance between the X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and numerous other heroes. Even with nearly every major hero participating, victory remained out of reach for most of the conflict. The final confrontation became so desperate that many of Marvel's greatest heroes willingly sacrificed themselves to weaken him. Characters such as the Avengers and Fantastic Four threw themselves into battle knowing they might not survive. A villain capable of challenging the Avengers, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and countless other heroes at the same time would instantly become one of the most overwhelming forces the MCU has ever faced. So we are not seeing him anytime soon.